Imagine a time when weapons could burn on water and airships floated like luxury hotels in the sky. Some of the most groundbreaking inventions in history weren't always welcomed with open arms. These are the strangest historical inventions that were banned for being too advanced. In the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire created something that might as well have been magic, known as Greek fire. It was a weapon that could burn on water, stick to anything it touched, and continue to burn even after being doused in water. It was very ahead of its time. As you can imagine, this was mostly used in naval warfare, and it was so devastating that it helped keep the Byzantines in control of their empire for centuries. The exact formula for Greek fire was kept a closely guarded secret. A lot of historians believe that it involved a mixture of ingredients like sulfur, naphtha, a flammable liquid hydrocarbon mixture, and a chemical compound called quicklime, but no one really knows for sure. The Byzantine Navy would deploy it using special siphons mounted on ships, spraying the burning liquid onto enemy vessels. The fear surrounding Greek fire was so intense that some believed it had mystical powers, and everyone was desperate to figure out how to replicate it. But the secret was lost over time, and by the end of the empire, the knowledge of Greek fire disappeared with it. So, not necessarily banned, but no longer a thing, thankfully. The invention of the mechanical clock in the 13th century was pretty huge, to say the least. Before this, people relied on sundials, water clocks, or church bells to track time, but when mechanical clocks came onto the scene, they completely transformed things. Being able to measure time accurately meant people could schedule work more precisely, leading to a much more efficient and productive day-to-day existence. And I know what you're thinking, why is the mechanical clock on the list? It never went away. Well, that almost wasn't the case. See, this new technology wasn't universally welcomed. Some were scared that precise timekeeping would disrupt the traditional rhythm of life. Work hours became regulated, and people's lives were governed by the clock rather than the sun. Some places banned the widespread use of mechanical clocks at first because of this massive shift, and some even feared the influence it could have on religion, as the bell ringing of church clocks wouldn't be the main way to track time for daily activities and prayers anymore. The introduction of the mechanical clock signaled the start of industrialization, and with that came new social challenges. As the technology became more widespread, there was a major shift from a society that lived in harmony with natural cycles to one that was now governed by this constant ticking machine. In a lot of ways, the clock became a symbol of progress and a tool for control. It was the dawn of a new age, but also a sign that technology would soon have a much deeper impact on how people live their lives. You know, not to be overly dramatic or anything like that. In the early 1900s, the Zeppelin revolutionized air travel. Unlike airplanes, this massive airship could carry passengers across countries with far more comfort. It's not often that you see images of what the insides of these things looked like for passenger travel, but oh boy, were they lavish. Invented by Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, they were considered marvels of engineering. But as useful as they were also dangerously vulnerable, especially during wartime. In fact, Zeppelins were used extensively by Germany during World War I for bombing raids over Britain, but with the development of faster, more agile aircraft, they became obsolete. But then there was the infamous Hindenburg disaster in 1937 when the Zeppelin LZ-129, one of the largest airships ever built, caught fire during a landing in New Jersey. It crashed, killing 36 people, and at that point people just weren't really that enthused about riding in Zeppelins anymore. Zeppelins are still used for advertising today, but the crash led to the banning of commercial travel. Vikings were expert navigators who traveled vast distances across the seas, often in pretty crappy weather, and one of the tools they would have used to navigate was a mysterious crystal known as the Sunstone, thought to be a form of Iceland spar, a form of calcite that has the ability to polarize light. This helped them determine the position of the sun even when the sky was overcast or when they were navigating in the long Arctic nights. This could have allowed the Viking explorers to confidently chart their course, but the Vikings never left any detailed records of their navigation methods, and the Sunstone's use wasn't fully understood until centuries later. By the time we caught wind of it, its use had faded into myth, and the technology was mostly forgotten. If the Vikings had fully utilized the Sunstone and passed down their knowledge, who knows how much further they could have gone. Leonardo da Vinci was hundreds of years ahead of his time. In the late 15th century, he sketched plans for what he called an aerial screw, a device that looks very similar to a helicopter. His design had a large screw-like spiral that would theoretically lift a machine off the ground. While it was never built and probably wouldn't have worked with the technology of the time, he still envisioned the mechanics of flight long before powered aircraft became a thing. The problem with his helicopter was that it relied on the human body's power to turn the screws. You'd have to manually crank it, which, as you might guess, wouldn't have spun nearly fast enough to get the thing off the ground, let alone have it stay there. While it wasn't banned per se, it was practically ignored for centuries as something too outlandish for its time. But the really cool thing is that today we do have machines based on this exact concept. Of course, powered by far more reliable energy sources than human muscle. Imagine having to manually move a helicopter like a paddle boat. That's silly. I kind of like that idea. Nikola Tesla, known for his genius in electrical engineering, invented the Tesla Coil in 1891 as a way to demonstrate wireless energy transmission. The coil could produce high voltage electricity, and with it, Tesla dreamed of sending power without wires to anywhere in the world. At the time, this idea was revolutionary, but also incredibly dangerous. Tesla demonstrated his invention by making the air crackle with lightning bolts, showing that electricity could jump large distances. This, of course, was terrifying to some folks. It opened the door to far too many possibilities, from weaponized energy to unregulated power grids. Some say that certain powerful people were actually afraid of Tesla's ideas, and that's why his coil was banned in certain places. While wireless transmission didn't really take off during his time, Tesla's coil did lay the groundwork for future breakthroughs. It ended up becoming a symbol of what could have been if the world had been ready to embrace it. Well, today, the Tesla coil is still a crowd favorite at science museums at least, but it does make you wonder, what could our world look like now if wireless energy had been fully developed back then? The concept of automata, self-operating machines, sounds like a pretty modern idea, but it actually dates back centuries. The 18th century is when things really started to get interesting. Craftsmen like Jacques de Vaucanson made complex mechanical figures that could do some pretty amazing things for their day, like a life-size figure that would play 12 different melodies on a flute. He built that in 1735. Devices like these were more than just toys, they were early versions of robots, way ahead of their time. But they were very complex and costly, so only a few were ever built. As these automatons became more popular, some started to worry about what they represented. Some were scared that they were a sign that humanity was being replaced by machines. Well, that sounds very similar to the types of fears people are having today. There were also rumors at the time that these creations had occult or supernatural powers. That's more fittingly old-timey. But because of these fears, though, devices like this were sometimes banned, especially in certain parts of Europe where the clergy and rulers worried about the implications of machines that could mimic human behavior. Automata weren't just inventions of the Renaissance, though. They actually had their roots in ancient Greece. Greek engineers like Hero of Alexandria built early steam-powered machines that could open doors or even serve drinks. He created an ancient version of a vending machine. You'd insert a coin and this machine would pour a drink for you. Just nuts. These things were clearly groundbreaking. Some think that Hero's automated systems might have been used in temples too, powered by steam to create these awe-inspiring spectacles. But a lot of the knowledge about these machines was lost for centuries, and some people think it might have been purposely hidden, maybe to avoid shaking up the social order or threatening traditional jobs. Imagine if the Greeks had really gone all in on this stuff, though. They could have ended up with a way more advanced society. Who knows how different things might have looked if those creations hadn't been forgotten over time. Charles Babbage's difference engine, developed in the 1830s, is often hailed as the first mechanical computer. His design could perform very complex calculations, a task that would have been an incredible time saver for mathematicians at the time. The invention was a huge leap forward, but it came with a hefty price tag and the suspicion of a government that wasn't entirely convinced that it was necessary. After Babbage's funding was pulled, he couldn't finish the project, and the difference engine was left as nothing more than a fascinating concept. It wasn't until the late 20th century that engineers successfully built a working version of his design, proving that his ideas were way ahead of their time. Some say the British government might have banned the project out of sheer lack of understanding or fear of how this technology could impact workers, industries, and jobs. But whatever the reason, Babbage's dream to create an automated machine for calculations didn't come to be in his lifetime, and computing didn't make the leap forward until much later. In the mid-1800s, the first ironclad warships were introduced, revolutionizing naval warfare. These ships, which had iron armor plating instead of traditional wooden hulls, made wooden ships pretty much obsolete. The most famous ironclads were the USS Monitor and the CSS Virginia, which famously faced off during the American Civil War. These ships changed naval battles forever, and because ironclads were so effective, wooden ships were just phased out, and the technology was quickly adopted by countries around the world. The idea of an impenetrable ship made with advanced materials like iron created a new arms race in naval technology. Ironclads may have been banned or scrapped in some countries, but they certainly paved the way for modern naval warfare. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.